A chance encounter. The afternoon sun hung low and golden over the shopping center parking lot. It was one of those late summer days when the heat shimmers up from the pavement in waves, making everything look like it's moving slightly, even when it's perfectly still. Marcus stood near his car, checking his phone for what must have been the 10th time in 5 minutes. He was early for his blind date. This alone was unusual. Marcus was not someone who typically prepared for these things with such care. He had dressed in his best jeans and a soft gray shirt. He had even gotten a haircut the day before. His friend Sarah had set this up, promising that Jennifer was exactly what he needed, though Marcus had learned not to trust Sarah's matchmaking instincts. Still, here he was, standing in a parking lot, waiting. At 7:15 in the evening, his phone buzzed. He reached for it hopefully. The text was brief. Asterisk sorry. Can't make it tonight. Family emergency. Rain check. Asterisk. Marcus felt the familiar weight settle over him. This was the third cancellation in as many months. He stood there for a moment, staring at the words on his screen, wondering if he should feel disappointed or relieved. Mostly, he just felt tired. He had just decided to head home and order pizza when he heard it. The sound of a child crying, not nearby, but not far away either. The sort of cry that came from exhaustion and frustration mixed together. Marcus glanced around. Most of the parking lot was emptying out now as evening set in. Cars were pulling away toward the exit. The crying grew louder. It wasn't his business. He knew that, but something in the sound made him pause. It was the kind of cry that spoke of a long day, of things falling apart slowly until everything shattered at once. He walked toward the sound, his shoes making soft sounds against the hot pavement. Between two rows of cars, he spotted them. A woman was sitting on the curb, her back against a white SUV. She wore a light blue button-up shirt, now rumpled from the day. Two small children sat beside her, a boy who looked to be about 4 and a girl perhaps 6 years old. The boy was the one crying, his face turned into the woman's shoulder. The girl sat very still, her eyes watching the parking lot with a strange, adult-like quiet. The woman herself looked out across the lot with an expression that Marcus recognized immediately. It was the look of someone who had reached the end of their strength and was now just waiting to see what came next. Marcus almost turned around, almost walked back to his car, and left well enough alone. This was not his problem. But he didn't. Instead, he stopped a respectful distance away. "Are you okay?" he asked. The woman's head turned slowly toward him. She had warm brown eyes and traces of freckles across her nose. Her hair, which must have been carefully curled that morning, hung partly loose now. When she looked at him, her expression shifted, something like surprise, mixed with the kind of vulnerability that comes from being caught at your lowest moment. "We're fine," she said, but her voice wavered slightly. She reached up and wiped at her own eyes, which Marcus now noticed were wet. "We're okay. Just having a rough moment." The boy's crying had quieted to small, hiccuping sobs. The girl looked at Marcus with solemn curiosity. "Bad day?" Marcus asked. He wasn't sure why he was still standing there. He wasn't skilled at this sort of thing, at approaching strangers and opening conversations. And yet, something about the scene in front of him made walking away feel like the wrong choice. The woman let out a small, exhausted laugh. "The worst kind," she said. She took a breath, as if deciding whether to say more. "My car won't start, and the mechanic said the part they need won't be available until tomorrow. My husband is out of town on business. I drove here to meet my mom. She was supposed to help with the kids for the evening, but she had an accident. She's okay, but she's at the hospital getting checked out. My sister is with her, and I'm just..." She gestured vaguely at the parking lot, at the children, at everything. "Stuck. Completely stuck." Marcus looked at the SUV behind her, then back at the woman. "Did you try roadside assistance?" he asked. "Dead battery in my phone," she said, with a sort of grim humor. "And my daughter's tablet was running out of power, so I used her charger for my phone. But then the power bank died, and..." She shook her head. "It's stupid. Everything just collapsed at once." The little girl reached over and took her mother's hand. The boy was quieting now, his crying reduced to occasional small whimpers. Marcus made a decision. He didn't know what it meant. He didn't know where it would go, but he made it anyway. "My name is Marcus," he said, "and I have a fully charged phone, and a car that runs. And I think..." He paused, considering. "I think I was supposed to be somewhere tonight, but that fell through. So technically, I'm free." The woman stared at him for a long moment. He could see her processing this, checking her instincts about this stranger in the parking lot. "I'm not a threat," he added quickly. "I work in accounting. I'm probably the least interesting person you'll ever meet. My friend Sarah set me up on a blind date tonight, and the woman canceled, which is why I'm just standing around in a parking lot on a Friday evening." Something in his earnest rambling seemed to settle her. A small smile appeared at the corner of her mouth. "I'm Emma," she said. "This is Connor and Sophie." She gestured to the children. "And thank you, but I don't want to ruin your evening further. You've been very kind." "My evening was already ruined," Marcus said. "But now it's getting interesting." He pulled out his phone. "Let me call a tow truck for you. And while we're waiting, I could drive you somewhere. Or we could just sit here. Either way, you don't have to handle this alone." Emma looked like she might cry again, but this time for a different reason. She nodded, very slowly. The next hour unfolded in a way that Marcus would find difficult to explain to Sarah later. He called a tow truck and was informed there would be a 45-minute wait. He then drove Emma and the children to a nearby diner, the kind of small, warm place with red vinyl booths and patient wait staff. Connor and Sophie ordered hot chocolate and grilled cheese sandwiches. Emma ordered coffee and just sat there for a while, not talking, just breathing. Marcus let the silence exist. He didn't fill it with small talk or nervous chatter. He simply sat across from them, occasionally handing napkins to Connor when the little boy got chocolate on his face, listening to Sophie ask him questions about cars, responding honestly and without condescension. By the time they returned to the parking lot, the tow truck was already there. Marcus stayed while they loaded Emma's car onto the flatbed. The mechanic, a kind-looking man in his 60s, recommended a repair shop nearby. Emma exchanged information with him, then turned to Marcus. "I don't know how to thank you," she said. "This was so kind. You have no idea what it meant to me, not having to figure all of this out alone." Marcus looked at her tired eyes and her carefully maintained composure and the way her hand held firmly to Sophie's shoulder. "I do actually," he said, "because I think you would have figured it out. But you didn't have to, and that matters." Emma bit her lip. "Can I?" She started, then stopped. "I mean, would it be? Do you maybe want to get coffee sometime? When I'm not a disaster. When I can actually sit still for 5 minutes without jumping up to wipe someone's nose." Marcus felt something shift in his chest. Something small and warm and hopeful. "I would like that," he said. "But for the record, I think you're pretty great exactly like this." They exchanged phone numbers. Emma's phone buzzed almost immediately with a text from her mom. The accident had been minor. Just some bruises. Everyone was going to be fine. Marcus drove home alone that night. His apartment was quiet and empty, the way it always was. He ordered the pizza he had planned on and sat with it, thinking about the woman in the blue shirt and her solemn-eyed daughter and the little boy who had slowly stopped crying as the evening progressed. His blind date hadn't shown up, but somehow, he felt like he had met someone far more important. 3 months later, Emma was sitting across from him at an actual dinner table in a nice restaurant. Her friend was watching Connor and Sophie, and Emma, with her hair carefully styled and her eyes bright with something that looked like joy, was laughing at something he had just said. Marcus reached across the table and took her hand. "I'm glad your car broke down," he said. Emma squeezed his fingers gently. "I'm glad you were in that parking lot," she said. "Alone, and kind, and willing to help a complete stranger." "I'm glad I wasn't at my blind date," Marcus said. Emma laughed again. "I should thank her for canceling, shouldn't I?" "I already did," Marcus said. In my head, about 1,000 times. Later, as they drove back toward Emma's house, Marcus thought about how life worked. How sometimes the things that felt like they were falling apart were actually just rearranging themselves into something better. How sometimes showing up, really being present for another person, was enough to change everything. The parking lot where they had met was empty now, dark under the stars. But Marcus knew he would remember it forever. Not as a place of trouble or rejection or canceled plans, but as the spot where his actual life had finally begun. And that made all the difference.